What is not a bullet you dodged, but a huge tactical nuke you dodged? The second floor of the house I was renting collapsed a month after I moved out. Apparently a water pipe sprung a leak shortly after we left. We weren't in any trouble. Probably all that damn stomping around. Signed, downstairs neighbor. I'd never vacuumed my ceiling at 3 a.m. before living in a downstairs apartment. Petty revenge is surprisingly cathartic. Dude. My upstairs neighbor would run back and forth across their apartment for hours at 3 a.m. Like, WTF were they even doing? I went up there and knocked on the door to politely ask them to stop. Seriously, very politely, because maybe they didn't realize it, that's cool. So she goes to the management and says that I went out to my patio, climbed up one floor to her patio, and put stickers all over her plants and furniture. What? I was 3 floors up, and there was a concrete sidewalk with a fence that had spiky tops that if I fell, I could splat on the sidewalk or impale myself. That, and I was overweight, and couldn't climb up on her patio even if I wanted to do that. The manager of the complex came up to me and said to stop bothering her and told me of her accusations that I climbed up onto her patio, and told me to stop doing that. I was incredulous. Oh, the fun of apartment living. Like once a week in an apartment I lived in, I would hear really loud pounding in the apartment below. It was really ducking annoying, but I didn't say anything. Then one week I'm walking home, and I can see in through the windows and notice. When he has his son over, he's playing basketball in his apartment. When I was 11 I started losing vision in my left eye, and eventually went completely blind in about 2 to 3 weeks. After lots of testing we found that I had a brain tumor in my left optic nerve that would likely spread quickly. They gave me 1.5 years to live in the best case scenario with treatment. They got the eye surgically removed, started me on radiation and chemo, and luckily I responded well to it. Cancer's long gone, am now a cyclops, and happy to be disease-free. Congrats on beating cancer as a kid. Do you rock an eye patch? My neighbor is a vet that lost his eye and wears one. Always thought they were cool. I'd love to wear one more often, but I need to find one that's comfortable. They always feel itchy to me, but I should invest in a custom one someday. Had a GFO finally broke down and had a custom one made that was formed to her face, and now she's got a whole collection. Based on what she said, custom is the only way to go in order to make sure they don't rub uncomfortably on bits of your face. I had just moved to Colorado by myself, and for whatever reason my mom was encouraging me to get out of the apt and go see the new Batman movie. That was the night of the theater shooting, and not only was that the theater, but it was also the showing I was considering going to. I stayed up late playing League of Legends instead and woke up to a lot of texts and missed calls. Probably not ideal for my family's blood pressure that I slept in pretty late that day too. I'm sorry to hear that you played League of Legends. Me too. The real disaster is I still enjoy it. There was an apartment I really wanted, but at the last minute I found a slightly better one. The apartment I almost moved into burned to the ground a month later. This has the makings of a good Twilight Zone episode. Miss a flight and the plane could crash too. My wife was supposed to be on a flight that crashed. Rescheduled to the next one, because a business trip took longer. I did not get that text message in time. That was not a fun day. I used to own a gym with a partner. I sold my half of the company and took a boring but stable government job about 3 months before the pandemic. Back in college. Ex cheated and got preggo. Blamed it on me, involved her family and all. I was willing to file a case in court with medical legal as needed. Ex got too pressured as I was tallying to her dad about medical tests, etc. Out of nowhere she admitted that I wasn't the father and it was some classmate she had a fling with. On a road trip in college with 4 friends. We stopped halfway for a pit stop because I had explosive diarrhea and was getting more sick by the minute. Friends carried on to Vegas and left me with one of the guys who rented us a car to return home. The friends that carried on got into a rollover, 1 died, 2 will be injured for life. We went to Thailand in 2003 for Christmas. I spent a number of years there in the early 90s as a kid, and loved it so much that we were gonna do it again the next year. Spent Christmas watching the sun come up on a beach at Phuket again. We had the tickets and everything, but because of some new fallout from an Enron-adjacent scandal, my dad wasn't allowed to leave the country. He wasn't implicated, but was in the C-suite of a credit card company, and all such people were under travel advisory. Anyway, the very hotel we were gonna stay at got 100% wrecked by the tsunami, so I guess we got lucky. My aunt and uncle were on the beach that morning just before the tsunami hit. They had scheduled a boat tour, but when they got there, the boat was broken. The owner had to cancel. They were standing on the beach trying to figure out what to do with the rest of their morning when they saw the tide pulling way out. My aunt and uncle happened to be seasoned sailors, so they knew that was a precursor to a tsunami. They ran up down the beach telling people to get out now, but most people just ignored them. They called their grown kids who were on vacation with them, told them to get as far inland as possible. Then they got in their rental car, just booked it uphill. So yeah, they dodged that tactical nuke, too. I remember hearing about how a 10-year-old girl on vacation with her parents is credited with saving a bunch of people's lives because she had learned about tsunamis in class and recognized the signs. Thankfully, her parents listened to her and managed to convince the hotel employees to evacuate the beach. Yes. Tilly Smith. She'd learnt about tsunamis in her geography lesson 2 weeks prior. My father-in-law was working on construction of a power plant and was scheduled work Sunday, was a union pipe fitter. Saturday he got a call from another company asking him to run a job much closer to his house, think 5-minute commute versus 50, so he accepted and didn't go to the power plant job Sunday. That day there was an explosion at the plant and people in the crew he was working with wound up getting killed. Edit, doing everything to avoid using the cliché "this blew up" given the context. To confirm, because it was being asked a lot, yes, this was the plant in Middletown, CT. This was a pretty significant event in the state of CT and made national news, so I'm not shocked so many of you were able to identify exactly where it was. I'm sure my father-in-law wasn't the only one that didn't go in that day, as it was also Super Bowl Sunday. Something similar happened to my uncle. He was working an outage, I think it was this one, and his partner told him to go off to lunch and he would cover. My uncle walked away and there was a huge explosion just a few minutes later. His partner was critically injured. I think he was the one who died at the hospital. If he had not told my uncle to go off for lunch, he would have been dead as well. 24 years old, had a pesky sore on my tongue that was really bothering me. My boyfriend's dad was a dentist, so when I was over at his house one night I asked him to take a look. He recommended I go see an oral surgeon the next day for him to check it out. The next day I decided it was feeling better, so I tried to cancel my appointment, but my boyfriend's dad insisted I go. I went, and the oral surgeon pretty much diagnosed it as cancer on the spot. It was aggressive, and by the time of my surgery to remove it, it had already spread to multiple lymph nodes. They ended up removing over half my tongue, followed by chemo and radiation. Given how aggressive it was, I often think that if I had put off the doctor's visit any longer, I probably wouldn't have survived. In coming up on my 10-year anniversary in January, I was briefly engaged to a man who has since cheated on his gorgeous, intelligent, sweet wife hundreds of times. They are separated but have 2 children and will likely reconcile. I broke our engagement when he said that he thought it was perfectly okay for a man to cheat on his wife if they'd been married for a while and he'd gotten bored. Oddly enough, he didn't believe a woman was entitled to do the same. I feel so badly for his poor wife now. He began cheating on her 2 years into their marriage when she was pregnant with their first child. I've known a couple of people like this. And they usually have amazing spouses. Silver lining for me is one of them was my wife's first husband. His loss was my gain. Had the best woman on the planet and ducked it up. I almost feel sorry for him. Almost. I was moving abroad to do a postgrad degree. My flight was to leave out of Newark early morning on 911. A family friend who worked in the towers kept prodding me to move my flight to the afternoon and come visit him in the office so he could show me around. My parents were pressuring me to go as well since it was a good networking opportunity. I was on the fence, but decided not to since I was a poor student and didn't want to pay the cab fare from my hotel in NJ to Lower Manhattan. Our friend made it out, thankfully, and I'm guessing I would have well, but no way would I want that experience burned in my memory. Holy shit. What did your friend and family say to you after the attacks? It was a strange experience since I landed at Charles de Gaulle a day, or 2. After, since I was moving there for 2 years and didn't really know anyone. The footage was literally the first thing I saw replayed on TV after exiting the plane. This was back when long distance was expensive, and again, I was a poor grad student, so I only had spoken with my family briefly from the airport. They knew I was had chosen not to meet our friend at the towers before I flew because I'd spoke to my mother shortly before takeoff. I remember a few emotional phone calls in the weeks after I made from the telephone booth outside of my apartment in the second. It was generally a lonely experience living away from the US in the weeks and months after, but there was a huge outpouring of warmth from French people at the time, I can never express enough gratitude towards the French for that. As soon as someone found out I was American, people went out of their way to be helpful and express sympathy. I was an American living in France during 9/11. Because of the time difference, things happened there at around 4 p.m. I was out with friends and none of us had cell phones, so we didn't get the news for a while. But we had people coming up to us on the street, since they heard us speak English, and tell us different things. Like that fighter jets had attacked NY. Or that there were 9 planes that had crashed into Washington, D.C. I had no clue what was going on until we stopped at another friend's house and they had the TV on. Because there were reports of Arabs celebrating in the heavy Arabic sections of Paris, all of us Americans were asked to stay in their apartments as much as possible, and to not speak English in public. But, I agree with you about the general French population. Many people reached out to us and offered their sympathy. I attended a memorial event in my city a week after the towers, as the gendarmes hoisted an American flag as a sign of solidarity to the people that died. I'm getting misty-eyed remembering it. Edit, for everyone saying that Arabs celebrating was made up, maybe your news reports in your country made that up, but it was widely publicized in France and in all the newspapers. That being said, it was not everyone that was celebrating, but rather pockets of people. In no way should Arabs Muslims be vilified for the actions of a few individuals.